The hallway outside the conference room smelled like coffee and dust. The chairs inside were all lined up neatly, but there was tension in the air so thick you could almost touch it. The morning sun filtered through the glass walls, warm and golden, but it didn't bring any peace to the people sitting inside. It was supposed to be a regular meeting. Sundar Pichai had flown in quietly that morning, as he always did. No fuss, no grand entrance. He took the same seat at the end of the table. He wore a simple blue shirt and had his hands folded neatly on the table. His eyes were calm, gentle, listening. Lakshmi Pichai, his mother, had come with him this time. She had flown in from Chennai 2 days before. She sat quietly at the back of the room, wrapped in a soft cotton sari, her hair neatly tied. She didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She only watched her son with quiet pride, like a candle burning softly in a dark corner. Everyone knew who she was, and most people respected her just by looking at her. There was something in her presence, something you couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was her silence. Maybe it was the way she looked at people, like she saw past their titles and their fears, but not everyone in that room carried respect. His name was Rishi, a smart man, sharp young, one of the new hires who had risen fast. Too fast, some would say. He was known for being ambitious. But today, his ambition had crossed a line. The meeting had been going smoothly. Charts were shown, numbers explained, small disagreements handled with grace, until Sundar made a suggestion, just a small change in a product approach. Not a command, not a demand, just an idea. Rishi's hand shot up. He didn't wait for a nod. He stood, eyes flashing, voice louder than it should have been. With all due respect, he said, but his tone had no respect at all. You're wrong. Your idea will slow us down. And to be honest, we're tired of being slowed down. Some of us think we need fresh leadership. Someone who listens, someone who's in touch with what the younger generation actually wants. The words landed like cold rain on warm skin. The room went still. You could hear the humming of the ceiling lights. Someone dropped a pen, and it echoed like thunder. Rishi stood tall, breathing heavily, not even realizing how far he'd gone. Lakshmi looked up. Her fingers clutched the edge of her sari. She didn't say a word, but her eyes, those quiet, knowing eyes, looked straight at her son, and Sundar. He didn't move. He didn't frown. He didn't blink. He slowly placed his pen down on the table. He turned to Rishi, and what he said next wasn't angry. It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Thank you, Rishi, he said gently. You've reminded me of something my mother taught me a long time ago. The room waited. Rishi's face turned slightly confused. Sundar smiled softly, but it was a sad kind of smile. She told me that when someone raises their voice, it often means they haven't been truly heard in a long time. His words were calm, but they shook something deep in everyone listening. Then he turned to his mother. Amma, he said in Tamil, do you remember what you told me the day I didn't get into it? Lakshmi nodded once. Her voice was soft, but clear. I told you, you can still shine. Because respect is not given by a college. It is shown in how you treat others. Sundar turned back to Rishi. I may be wrong about this idea, and you may be right. But shouting at someone doesn't make your idea stronger. It only makes your heart weaker. Rishi opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He sat down slowly, as if the weight of his own words had finally caught up to him. No one said anything for a long moment. Finally, Sundar continued the meeting like nothing had happened. His tone still kind, his focus still steady. But the room had changed. Something deeper had settled in. Outside, the wind picked up slightly. The glass walls shook just a little. But inside, there was peace, and Lakshmi smiled, not the smile of a mother who had just watched her son win an argument, but the smile of a mother who had raised a man strong enough to choose kindness over pride. People would talk about that meeting for weeks, not because of the numbers, not because of the charts, But because of the moment, Sundar Pichai was insulted and replied, with grace that taught a lesson louder than any raised voice ever could. That moment had just begun a story that no one would forget, and it was only the beginning. After the meeting ended, most of the employees walked out quietly. No one whispered, no one joked. Even those who usually rushed to the elevators with phones in hand now moved slowly, their minds still caught in that one moment when Sundar had responded with such calm strength. Rishi stayed seated. He didn't move. His face had changed. He no longer looked proud. He looked unsure, like a child who had just realized he'd made a mistake, but didn't know how to fix it. Lakshmi stood up from the back and walked out of the room with soft steps. She didn't say anything to Rishi. She didn't even glance at him. Her silence was not cold. It was deeper than that. It was the kind of silence that makes a person think about their actions for a long time. Sundar gathered his papers. Slowly. He didn't rush. Then he looked up at Rishi. "Would you walk with me?" Sundar asked. Rishi stood without a word. He followed Sundar down the hallway, past the quiet workstations, past the sunlight pouring in from the windows, past the curious eyes that peeked from corners, but quickly turned away. They reached a small meeting room. Sundar opened the door and stepped inside. It was quiet, plain, just a table and 2 chairs. No screens, no clocks, just space to think. They sat across from each other. Sundar looked at Rishi, not with anger, but with something else, something that felt heavier, something like disappointment, but softer. "Why did you raise your voice?" Sundar asked, gently. Rishi took a deep breath. His voice was quieter now, almost like he didn't recognize himself. "I don't know," he said. I felt ignored. I've had so many ideas. I worked late every day. I tried to get noticed, but nobody saw me." Sundar nodded slowly. "And today, you wanted to be seen." Rishi nodded, shame in his eyes. Sundar leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "Do you know what my first job was?" he asked. I looked surprised. "No," he said. "I was a product manager," Sundar said. "I sat at a desk smaller than this table. I used to get coffee for my boss. No one remembered my name for months. They called me the quiet guy. But every day, I listened, I learned, and I stayed kind, even when I felt invisible." Rishi looked down. "I'm not upset that you disagreed with me," Sundar said. "In fact, you may be right. Maybe your idea is better. But when you shouted, you closed the door to growth, for yourself and for others." He paused. "Do you know why people follow leaders, Rishi?" he asked softly. Rishi didn't answer. "Not because they shout the loudest," Sundar continued. "Not because they have the most power. People follow those who lift others up, even when they don't have to." Rishi's hands trembled. His voice cracked. I just wanted someone to believe in me." Sundar's expression changed. For a moment, he looked not like a CEO, but like a man who knew exactly what that feeling was. "Then be someone worth believing in," he said. He stood up. "I'm not going to fire you," Sundar said quietly. "That would be easy. But learning the hard part, and that's what you're going to do now." Rishi looked up, eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. Sundar opened the door. "Let's build something better together," he said. "But next time, bring your voice with strength, not with anger." As they stepped back into the hallway, Lakshmi was there, waiting. She didn't ask what happened. She only looked at Rishi. And this time, Rishi lowered, his eyes not out of fear, but out of respect. What happened behind that door didn't stay a secret. Not because anyone spoke of it loudly, but because Rishi changed. And change like that is hard to hide. In the days that followed, Rishi worked differently. He listened more. He asked questions. He helped others with patience. And people began to notice him not for his ambition, but for his grace. But Sundar's journey that day wasn't over yet. Later that night, at home, Lakshmi had something to say, and what she told Sundar would open a part of his heart he hadn't touched in years. The sky outside Sundar's home was dark. Soft city lights flickered in the distance. The air smelled like fresh earth, as if rain had passed through earlier and left behind a quiet blessing. Inside, the living room was warm, simple, no gold frames, no rich carpets, just a small sofa, a table with a few books, and a photo of a younger Sundar with his parents. Lakshmi sat on the edge of the sofa, her sari folded neatly, her eyes looking at something only she could see. Sundar entered the room. Slowly. He placed his phone on silent and poured 2 cups of tea, one for himself, one for her. He didn't ask if she wanted it. He just knew. They sat in silence for a while. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that comes between 2 people who understand each other without needing words. Finally, Lakshmi spoke. "You handled it well," she said, her voice soft. Sundar looked at her. "I tried," he replied, "but it stayed with me." That moment, the tone in his voice, I could feel something deeper than just disagreement. Lakshmi nodded. "Do you remember your cousin, Vishal?" she asked suddenly. Sundar was surprised. He hadn't heard that name in years. "Of course," he said. "We used to fight over the cricket bat." Lakshmi smiled faintly. "He came to our house once," she continued. "You were 12, he was 14, and he shouted at you because you touched his new bat." Sundar frowned. The memory was blurry. "You didn't shout back," Lakshmi said. "Yuga gave him the bat and walked away. Later that night, you sat in the corner and cried quietly." Sundar looked down at his tea. The memory was coming back now. The sharpness in Vishal's voice, the embarrassment, the way he had held his tears until no one was watching. "You were angry," Lakshmi said, "but you didn't let anger win." She placed her hand on his dot. Double quotes, "I knew then," she whispered, "that you would lead people one day, because the world doesn't need more loud voices. It needs calm hearts." Sundar felt something shift inside him, something old and buried. "But Amma," he said slowly, "what if people mistake kindness for weakness?" Lakshmi smiled gently. "Then let them," she said, "because real strength does not need to be proven. It just is." The room fell, silent again, but Sundar's mind was moving fast now. He remembered how he had carried that lesson through school, through college, through every job interview and every failure. He had survived more rejections than he could count, but he had never shouted, never blamed, never pointed fingers. But today, Rishi had reminded him of something else. Sometimes, the people who shout the loudest are the ones who feel the most invisible. And maybe, just maybe, Sundar had been too busy lately, too distant, too high up the ladder to notice the ones still climbing. He looked at his mother again. "I want to do something different," he said. Lakshmi tilted her head slightly. "Like what?" "I want to spend a day," Sundar said, "just listening. No phones, no meetings, just sitting with employees, hearing their stories. Not as their CEO, but as a person." Lakshmi's eyes lit up. Double quotes. "Then do it," she said. "You will find what you didn't know you had lost." The next morning, Sundar canceled a board call. He sent a quiet message to his assistant. "No schedule today. I'll be walking the floors." People were surprised to see him on the 5th floor near the help desk. He sat on the beanbags in the common area. He joined a group for lunch without an invitation. He asked the interns what they were building. He listened. Not once did he correct anyone. Not once did he speak about his own ideas. By late afternoon, something had changed. People laughed freely around him. Some shared struggles. Others asked him questions they were too scared to ask before. One engineer showed him a side project she was building in her free time. Sundar nodded with true interest, and then, just before he left the room, someone handed him a small note. No name, just handwriting. The note said, "Thank you for listening. I was thinking about quitting. Now, I'm thinking about staying." Sundar held that note in his hand longer than he should have, as he walked back toward his office. The noise of the building faded behind him. The note was still in his pocket, folded carefully, but just as he reached his door, someone was waiting outside. It was Rishi, and he wasn't alone. Sundar stopped walking the moment he saw Rishi. He stood outside Sundar's office, eyes nervous, lips pressed together like he'd been rehearsing something over and over in his mind. But it wasn't just Rishi this time. Beside him stood a woman, in her 50s maybe, dressed in a plain green kurta. She looked humble, tired, and shy. Her hands were wrinkled. Her eyes told stories she hadn't spoken yet. Rishi stepped forward first. "Sir," he said, "I know I've already taken too much of your time, but may I ask you for 5 more minutes?" Sundar looked at the woman beside him, then back at Rishi. He opened the door. "Come in," he said. They entered the quiet room. The air felt heavier now, like something meaningful was about to unfold. Rishi sat down. The woman remained standing. "This is my mother," Rishi said quietly. "Her name is Kavya." Kavya gave a small, respectful nod. Sundar stood and gently offered her the seat beside her son. "Please, sit," he said. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair, folding her hands in her lap. She looked around the room, then at Sundar, and gave a faint smile, filled with something that felt like both pride and apology. Rishi cleared his throat. "Yesterday," he said slowly, "I was ashamed. After what happened, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what you said, and then, I remembered something." He turned to his mother. "My mother once told me that when you truly hurt someone, you don't fix it with words. You fix it with actions." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin folder. Inside it were drawings, notes, and a handwritten letter. "This," he said, "is my real idea. The one I wanted to share that day. The one I shouted about." Instead of explaining, he placed it on Sundar's desk, then looked down. "But I didn't come here to ask for your approval. I came here to show you that I've learned something, because of you." Sundar opened the folder. The drawings were rough, but full of passion. It was a design for a tool that could simplify how millions of users interacted with their phones. A small idea, but clever, thoughtful. He read the letter next. It wasn't about the project. It was a letter to Sundar, handwritten in simple, honest words. It said sorry. It said thank you. And it said something else. "You saw me when I didn't deserve to be seen." Sundar looked up at Kavya. She hadn't said a word, but now, with tears in her eyes, she finally spoke. "Sir," she whispered, "I raised my son alone. After his father passed, he was all I had. I taught him to speak his mind, but I didn't teach him when to listen. Yesterday, when he came home and told me what you did, I felt like you had taught him what I could not." Her voice broke. "Thank you," she said. Sundar was quiet. His heart was heavy, but warm. "Kavitaji," he said softly, "your son is brave. It takes strength to admit when we've failed. It takes more strength to return and try again." He turned to Rishi. "Your idea is interesting," he said. "I want you to build it with a team, but not because you apologized, because I believe you've changed." Rishi's eyes filled with emotion. He nodded. "Double quotes, and one more thing," Sundar said, looking between them. He took out a small badge from his drawer. It had the word mentor written on it. "I want you," Sundar said, "to mentor the next group of interns. Help them find their voice without needing to raise it." Rishi blinked. "Me?" Sundar smiled. "Yes, you." The meeting ended with a silent handshake. Kavita reached out and touched Sundar's hand lightly before leaving. It wasn't just a thank you. It was something deeper. Something from a mother to another mother's son. That evening, Sundar returned home. Lakshmi was in the kitchen, making tea. "You look tired," she said. "Not tired," Sundar replied. "Just full." They sat together again, sipping tea. "Amma," he said, "do you ever wonder how many hearts we touch without knowing?" Lakshmi smiled. "Every kind word is a seed," she said. "Some bloom in front of you, others bloom far away, but they all matter." Sundar nodded, but the week wasn't over yet. The very next morning, a message arrived that shook Sundar deeply. It wasn't from an employee. It was from someone from his past, and it would bring back a memory he had buried long ago. The message arrived at 7:42 in the morning. Sundar was sitting by the window, sipping his first cup of tea, the sky still soft with early light. Birds flew past lazily. The house was quiet. Lakshmi was still asleep. It was the kind of peaceful morning that made the heart feel lightened. Sundar looked down at his phone. His fingers stopped mid-scroll. His breath caught. The name on the screen was one he hadn't heard in over 20 years. Arun Mehta. He stared at it, unmoving, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something else. But they DDN single quotes T.Arun, Mehta.A, name tied to one of the hardest chapters in Sundar's early life. He opened the message. "Dear Sundar, I don't know if you'll remember me. We were classmates at IT. You probably do not want to hear from me. I wouldn't blame you. But I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. Can we meet? A place of your choosing. I will wait. Just give me 1 hour of your time. Arun. Sundar set the phone down slowly. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of old memories returning without warning. Arun had been his roommate during his first year at IT Smart. Charming, confident. Everything Sundar wasn't back then. Arun had a way of making people listen, and Sundar had a way of being overlooked. They were friends. At least, Sundar had believed so. Until the final semester, when a scholarship opportunity came. 1 spot, 2 names, and only 1 story got told. Arun had claimed the idea for a project they built together. Sundar never spoke up. He had stayed silent, respected the system, swallowed the pain. Arun got the scholarship. Sundar left quietly. No anger, no public fight, just silence. But it had stayed with him. For years, Sundar had buried it deep under achievement, humility, and forward motion. Now, with one message, it had returned. Lakshmi entered the room just then, tying her hair back, her eyes still soft from sleep. "Bad news?" she asked gently. Sundar didn't answer at first. Then he handed her the phone. She read it slowly, then looked up at him. "Do you want to meet him?" she asked. "I don't know," Sundar said. Lakshmi walked to the kitchen, poured her own tea, then came back. "You know," she said, "when someone breaks something precious, they carry a part of that weight forever. Sometimes, they come back not to be forgiven, but to make sure you're still whole." Sundar sighed. "But why now, after so many years?" "Because some storms take a long time to pass," she said. "But you don't have to meet him for him. You meet him for you." Later that afternoon, Sundar sent a short reply. "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Old Rose Cafe Chennai. Arun agreed in less than 5 minutes. The next morning, Sundar wore a plain white shirt. No security, no assistants. He walked alone into the old cafe he used to visit during college. The place hadn't changed much. Wooden chairs, soft yellow lights, the smell of filter coffee and dosa, and there, by the window, sat Arun. His hair was thinner, face a bit more lined, but the same eyes. Only now, they didn't sparkle with confidence. They looked tired, uncertain. Sundar walked over. "Thank you for coming," Arun said, standing quickly. Sundar nodded. "Let's sit." They did. For a while, no one spoke. Then Arun reached into his bag and pulled out a thin old notebook. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Sundar looked down. It was their project notebook, the one they used to sketch every idea. Sundar's handwriting was everywhere, double quotes. "I found this last year," Arun said. "I opened it for the first time in decades, and I saw the truth. All your work, your sketches, your code." He paused. "I've lived with guilt for so long, Sundar. I didn't even enjoy the scholarship. Every success after that felt like it stood on broken ground." His voice cracked. "I came today to say I was wrong. I was selfish. And you were the better man, even then." Sundar listened in silence. The pain was still there. Not sharp anymore, but dull. Like an old wound that aches when it rains. "I don't want anything," Arun said. "I just wanted to return this to you." He handed over the notebook. Sundar took it gently, fingers brushing the pages. Memories flooding back. "Thank you," he said quietly. Arun looked surprised. "You're thanking me?" he asked. "Not for what you did," Sundar said, "but for coming back. Most people never do." Arun lowered his eyes. "I hope you can forgive me." Sundar thought for a moment. "Forgiveness is not a gift I give," he said softly. "It's something I live. I moved on. I built my life. And now, I hope you build yours, on truth." They stood. Sundar held the notebook close to his chest as he turned to leave. Arun spoke one last time. "I heard about what you did for that employee, the one who shouted. You gave him grace, just like you gave me, silently, all those years ago." Sundar paused. "Grace," he said, "is not weakness. It's strength, ... without noise." He stepped outside. The sun was shining. The street was busy. Life moved on. But deep in his heart, something had lifted. Something heavy had finally been set down as he walked away. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video clip sent by a junior employee. It showed something happening inside the company. Something serious. And Sundars.com. Heart would now face its greatest challenge yet. The video was shaky, filmed by a young intern on her phone. The footage showed a group of junior employees gathered in a break room. Laughter filled the space at first light, casual. But then, the mood shifted. One voice rose above the rest, sharp, mocking. A senior manager stood at the center of the room, pointing at a young employee. "You think your idea matters?" he barked. "This isn't school. This is a business. We don't need feelings. We need results." The younger employee tried to speak, but the manager cut him off. "Sit down," the man said coldly. "Learn your place." Others in the room fell silent. No one stepped in. The laughter was gone. The clip ended there. Sundar watched it twice, not because he needed to, but because he felt something break inside him. It wasn't just about one person being humiliated. It was about a culture that allowed silence in the face of cruelty. And that was something he could not allow. He stood up and walked straight to the conference room. No calls, no schedule, no warning. Word spread fast. Within minutes, the room filled with managers, leads, and directors. Lakshmi arrived quietly and stood near the door, as she always did, watching, listening, present. Sundar entered with calm steps, the same calmness he had shown before, but this time, his voice carried weight. "I saw something today," he began, "not on a report, not in a chart, but on a face." The room was silent. A young man, he continued, was told to stay quiet, to know his place, to forget that his thoughts mattered. He paused, looked at each person in the room. "I want to be very clear. This is not the culture we stand for. We are not here to break people down. We are here to build them up." He turned to the screen behind him and played the video. No words, just the footage. When it ended, Sundar spoke again. "This company is not built by the loudest voice. It is built by the voice that lifts others when no one else will. His eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. You can lead with fear, he said, or you can lead with empathy. But only one of those leaves a legacy worth remembering. He walked to the window and looked out for a moment. Then he turned back. There will be change, he said, and it will begin now. He didn't announce punishments. Instead, he created something new. He called it the listening hour. Once a week, any employee, no matter their level, could speak directly to leadership. Not to pitch, not to complain, just to be heard. No judgment, no interruptions. Within a month, stories poured in. One intern shared how she almost left because no one remembered her name. Another employee revealed a brilliant idea, hidden under months of doubt. Teams began to shift. Leaders started asking more questions. People paused before speaking. They made space for each other. And that manager, he was asked to step down from his position. But Sundar didn't fire him. Instead, he assigned him to a mentorship program under RISHI. When asked why, Sundar replied simply, "Everyone deserves a chance to learn, even those who forgot how to listen." One afternoon, weeks later, Sundar was walking through the same hallway where Rishi had once raised his voice. The sunlight fell softly across the floor. A group of new hires passed him, smiling. A few nodded shyly. He stopped near the glass wall and stood still for a moment. Lakshmi walked up beside him. "You're quiet today," she said. Double quotes. "Just thinking," he replied. "About what?" He looked at her and smiled gently. How one raised voice gave birth to 1,000 better ones. She touched his arm lightly. "You did well, Kanna," she whispered. But Sundar shook his head. "No," he said. "We did well." She smiled. As they stood together, the sounds of the office buzzed gently around them, not loud, not forced, just alive, because something had changed, not just in the company, but in hearts. A culture of fear had bent under the weight of kindness, and it all began with one choice: to stay calm, to reply with grace, to teach not with anger, but with compassion, to lead not from the top, but from the center. And so the lesson lived on. Not just in policies, but in people, in quiet choices, in everyday courage, and in the way Sundar Pichai, son of Lakshmi, chose again and again, to answer noise with peace. A few months had passed. The office now had a different rhythm. There was more laughter in the hallways, fewer whispered complaints. People spoke to one another with care. It wasn't perfect. No place ever is. But something real had changed. One day, as the monsoon clouds gathered outside, Sundar sat in his small corner office, not reviewing profits or presentations, but a letter, a handwritten letter. It had come from a young intern. Her name was Meesha. "Dear Sir, I used to be scared to speak. I thought I didn't matter. Then I saw you sit in a circle with people like me. No cameras, no speeches, just listening. I shared one idea. You wrote it down. And now, that idea is being built. I go home and tell my father that I am part of something big, and he smiles. Thank you for showing me that I belong." Tears welled gently in Sundar's eyes. He folded the letter and placed it in a drawer beside his desk, next to a few things he kept close. The notebook Arun had returned, a photo of his mother, and that anonymous thank you note from months ago. Just then, a knock at the door. It was Rishi. He looked different now, calmer, focused. The loudness in his step had softened. There was a notebook in his hand, not for shouting, but for sharing. "Sir," he said, "can I speak with you?" "Always," Sundar said, waving him in. "I just came from the mentorship session," Rishi said. "The new batch is incredible, hungry, curious. They remind me of, well, me." He laughed softly, then paused. "But I wanted to thank you again, not just for believing in me, but for something else." Sundar raised an eyebrow. "For not giving up on people like me," Rishi continued. Because if you had, I wouldn't be here. Sundar nodded. Double quotes growth, he said, only happens when someone is willing to hold the mirror without throwing it. Rishi smiled. Oh, H and Kavita G. says hi, he added, speaking of his mother. She still talks about that day. Sundar smiled warmly. Send her my regards. Rishi left, and the room fell quiet again. Lakshmi entered a few minutes later. She held a cup of tea for her son, just as she used to when he was a boy, burning the midnight oil in a small house in Chennai. She placed the cup down and looked at him carefully. You look peaceful, she said. I feel it, Sundar replied. For the first time in a long time. Lakshmi sat down beside him. You've built something special, she said. I only started it, Sundar said. They built the rest. Lakshmi nodded slowly. You know, she said, when you were little, you used to fix your broken toys with tape. Never threw anything away. Not even the broken ones. Sundar chuckled. I still don't. Lakshmi looked at him with quiet pride. Maybe that's your gift, she said. Not building things, but fixing hearts. Gently, patiently. Outside, the rain finally began to fall. Soft at first, then steadier. Sundar stood at the window, watching the drops hit the glass. He thought of all the voices that had once been ignored. He thought of the angry voice in the conference room that started it all. He thought of the voice from his past that had hurt him but returned to heal. And he thought of the quiet voices like Misha, like Kavit, like Lakshmi that had shaped him in ways louder voices never could. He picked up his phone and typed a short message to the entire company. Let us keep choosing kindness, not just in meetings, but in moments. Because behind every raised voice, there is usually a quiet pain. Listen for it, answer it, lead with grace. He hit send then. Then he turned to his mother. Amma, he said, do you think people will remember all this? Lakshmi smiled. They won't remember your title, she said. They'll remember how you made them feel. Sundar nodded, and in that moment, something inside him settled. Because his journey had never really been about being CEO. It had always been about being a son. A listener. A builder of people. And above Ula, voice worth hearing.